Going to call to order continued meeting of the Planning Commission. Phyllis, roll call.
Chairperson Bob McCool.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Lisa Ritchie.
Here.
Commissioners Phyllis Harden here. David Harper.
Here.
Jerry Malia.
Here.
Ben Miller.
Here.
Jason Reese. Anthony Stewart.
Here.
Steve Whitty. Planner Stephen Williams.
Here.
Attorney Dan Harvey.
Here. Thank you. Do you have a minute for any public comment on any consent agenda, which we don't have tonight, right? Or non-agenda items, so anything not related to the public hearing tonight. If you have anything to speak to outside of that, now's your chance. Didn't expect any. All right, so we'll continue on. So this is a continuation of a public hearing to review and comment on a request for a subdivision plat and final development plan for blocks 16 to 24 of the Superior Town Center in downtown Superior. So we're going to continue that public hearing. Did want to confirm we have two commissioners that weren't at the previous meeting. Can you let us know, did you watch the video and are you up to speed on?
All 4 hours, 6 minutes and 59 seconds.
Excellent.
Yeah, I guess we're gluttons for punishment. So yeah, same here.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So they'll be participating in the continuation of this hearing. All right. So we will start. Well, actually, no. First order here is we did have an email from a resident asking us to reschedule this Planning Commission meeting to discuss the application. Wanted to give the applicant a chance to respond if they're interested in doing that. It was a resident request. Yeah, this was just based on some other things going on in town tonight.
Greg Saya, representing Toll Brothers. We would prefer to continue this hearing tonight if we can.
Okay, and then we can have discussion among ourselves, and if there is any, and if not, I'll entertain a motion either to continue the hearing on to a later date or to proceed with the public hearing. I just need a motion for one or the other.
I'll move that we proceed this evening.
Okay. Second? Second. Okay.
Seconded.
Oh, sorry. Commissioner Malia. And all in favor? Okay. No opposed? All right, it's unanimous. So we will continue on tonight. With that, staff have a brief introduction presentation.
I do. We're not going to rehash the 4 hours that Commissioner Harper mentioned earlier. I'm just going to kind of set the tone for, I guess, how we're going to proceed with this meeting. So we'll just turn it over to the applicant here in a minute in order to kind of respond. They have a slideshow prepared to clarify we identified 11 issues. They met with staff last Thursday afternoon, and we, kind of, I guess, brainstorm some ideas and some potential solutions that they're going to present for you guys tonight. And staff summarized those suggestions, and then kind of also give you a little summary as to what staff's opinion of them are. And that was delivered to you guys yesterday in this addendum to our memo. The other thing that came in just a little while ago was an email from Steve Whitty. He's not feeling well tonight, so he wanted to give you guys his thoughts. So I printed out emails for everybody so you guys can hear what he had to say. And then additionally, kind of based on the suggested solutions, we also, Dan and I worked today to update a PC resolution. So just so that you guys don't have to start from scratch. Obviously, that's something that we can change at the end, but that's available and was printed out for you guys as well. So with that, if there's no other questions for me on my kind of addendum to my memo, I'll turn it over to the applicant. And the other thing is we have Chase here again, thankfully, if you guys have any questions on the 3D model or want to see anything again.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant ready to present?
Good evening. Thank you for having us back again this week. Dave Williams, Principal of DTJ Design, 3101 Iris in Boulder. As Stephen said, we got together last week and had a very productive work session to address the various outstanding items, questions, issues that you all had identified in the last meeting. And so what you, I believe, got in advance our presentation, and Stephen's memo did a really good job, I think, of summarizing everything there, but I did want to run through things relatively quickly here. So the first, and we're not advancing. I may need your mouse. there we go. So we had this in here mainly just to remember to what all those various topics were. Won't need to, I'm not going to read all of this because it's basically is the same information that Stephen has in his memo. We did want to show graphically some of the things that we did agree on, though, however. Thought we had a pretty good conversation regarding how to handle the block length and came up with a hybrid solution for Alley 22, creating a private street in that location. The details of that are that we've added, the width of the alley itself remains the same, 26 feet, which is actually a little wider than the travel surfaces of the roadways nearby. But we've added a 5-foot sidewalk on the east side of that private drive or private street. We've also increased the setback along the driveways for the garages to 8 feet. We were at 5 feet previously. That provides for a little bit more visibility for cars backing out onto the new private street. And so that, in a net effect, shifts the all that row of lots west about 8 feet between the 5 foot of sidewalk and additional 3 feet in the rears, so that we were able to maintain a pretty healthy open space area there, but also create a navigable and we think safe street along that edge. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the pedestrian crossings of the various streets here. We got to a place of having some raised pavers, or raised crosswalks with pavers, one being on the generally on this multi-use trail through here. So one at Superior, one at Promenade, and then the one in the alley back here to help keep cars from traveling too fast in the alley back here. Then in addition to that, we have some colored concrete crossings. Those are generally at places where a pedestrian paseo crosses a street, such as here, 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 and here. And then the striped crosswalks will occur at main intersections of streets in locations such as Discovery Drive and over here in this part of the neighborhood. And then eventually also in here, but I'll talk about that intersection in just a moment. So that's I think we got to good consensus on where the pedestrianized, enhanced pedestrianized crossings should be. And we have a little photograph, a series of photographs here that show what that's about. Relative to, there was a comment regarding the multimodal trail here in terms of them serving these units as well as serving as a throughway. We're going to sign that and regulate that as a dismount zone to slow bicycles down if they happen to be in that area. The grading and the dimensions there just really didn't work out too well to add another walk in that area. So by going to a dismount zone, we think that will help to alleviate potential issues there. We also wanted to mention that well, I'll get to this intersection here, down here at Promenade and Superior, which was a big topic of conversation. We got to a pretty good solution, I think, here in terms of working within the rights of way of Promenade and Superior. You can see this little sketch off to the left. By having this bulb out here, as well as the introduction of these islands, it forces cars to slowly move through and make deliberate moves to make those through or turn movements. But without really impacting the bicycle traffic all that much. So we think this is a really good strategy for slowing down traffic at that intersection.
Has this been used anywhere? Can you point?
Yeah, in fact, we borrowed this illustration from the internet during research this, and we went through it with
Any
Alex
local
pretty
examples
extensively.
that we've seen?
You know, I don't know of any. Alex mentioned there might be one up on Norwood in Boulder.
Okay.
I think. Isn't that what he said?
26th Street.
There you go. Sorry, didn't see you back there. Sorry.
He's hiding.
26th Street. Sorry.
Okay.
Then there was a comment about not relying exclusively on the bike lanes for bicycle traffic. So on Promenade and on Superior, we worked with staff to get creative with the widths of each of these various lanes without changing the right-of-way. So in the west side, west end of Promenade, we went to a narrower bike lane right here, going down 7 feet to 6 feet, and narrower landscape tree lawn from 8 feet down to 7 feet, and added that into the walk. So now we've got a 7-foot walk there as opposed to a 5-foot walk, which we think will be better for, kids and tricycles and families with all their various appurtenances that go along with that on those two major east-west thoroughfares. But I also want to remind you that we still have the trail in Tract H that will provide good east-west connectivity as well. So the same section on Superior Drive, just on the opposite side of the street. As Stephen said, we also spoke about enhancing the cottage elevations that face Discovery and the alley back there, and worked really hard to come up with a pattern of windows and pop-outs that work with the floor plans inside, and we think those have become pretty well dressed up since. There's just 3 examples here. We'll ultimately have up to 15 of them. So that will all be part of our final package. Staff also asked that we look at some additional locations for enhanced elevations on the townhomes. This is what we had in the original application, and then we've added some. And those were primarily in places where along streets you can see the ends of those buildings, such as here, then through here, and in this area right in through here. Then there was also a comment from you all about what these would look like. They're all colored red. That's a symbol that they're the same unit. And what we're going to do is we're going to condition those that they can't have the same color scheme adjacent to each other. So that will provide some additional variety. Keeping in mind that the enhancements include pop-outs, additional windows, these bracketed fins, and a variety of materiality that's more dynamic than on the standard elevations. So between the color and these additional enhancements, we think we've done a pretty good job of dealing with that particular topic. The transitional townhomes right along Promenade, as we talked last time, these are the standard ones, and these are the transitional ones. One of the things that we're going to be, we only have 2 building types, a 5-plex and a couple of 3-plexes there. And we'll be limiting the number of roof decks that might be optioned. Keep in mind, these will be options, so they aren't going to automatically be there. In some cases, the home buyer may not choose to put that in. But say in this in the 5-plex, there'll be no more than 3 roof decks, and in the 2 3-plexes here, there'll be no more than 2 in each one of those. And again, they may not all be selected. And then there was a question about maintaining diversity of the cottages. And in addition to the, so this is the language that we're going to include in there, that no building model shall be repeated on more than 2 adjacent lots. And they have to be an alternative elevation style and color package, and no color packages will be repeated on adjacent lots or lots immediately across the street. And in addition, a minimum of 10% of each of the 3 elevation styles that we're promoting will be included in here. One thing I want to make sure I am clear about, because we didn't show it in our illustrations, is that the various color schemes that will be used for all these cottages apply to all of the different elevation styles. So even though we may have drawn the farmhouses as white, there are color schemes that go along with those as well. We just didn't include those in the package that you saw. Parking, we think we've got parking really, really well covered. We well exceed the minimum requirements. I've got the specifics here. If you give me just a second. I think we exceed the minimum number of off-street parking by, gosh, depending on the parking chart is a little bit difficult to understand because we kind of took the worst case scenario and assumed that every cottage would be a 3-car garage, which isn't really the case. There'll be a mix of 2- and 3-car garages. But if it were all 3-car garages, the minimum required number of spaces would be 701 of total off-street parking, and we're providing 748. In addition to that, there's 176 on-street parking spaces totaling 924. So, and then that number will ultimately come down, or the on-street or off-street parking will come down a little bit when we have the 2-car garages instead of the three-car garages. But more importantly, we addressed staff's concern about additional handicap parking spaces, and I wanted to show you where those are located. We've tried to be strategic about where those are to distribute them well throughout the site. So we have 2 up in this corner and adding an accessible walk to provide access to generally this part of the neighborhood. We're adding 1 here, which serves this part of the neighborhood, but it's also close to a crossing so that if people need to get across the other side, that's easily done. And then another one over here, same kind of thing. And then we still have the one that was here and the one here. So we've gone from 2 to 6. 2 is what's required. So anything over 2 is over and above what the minimum requirements would be for that. So we feel pretty good about the parking strategy for this neighborhood. And then there was discussion about whether we had adequate bicycle parking or not. In our original submittal, we had those focused on our central open space here. But in addition to that, now we've also included 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. So generally in these other open space elements throughout the neighborhood, so that someone who happens to ride their bike will find something in one of those open space elements in each neighborhood, or each part of the neighborhood. There was also a question about various kinds of other amenities. We talked a lot about our central kind of play art structure piece that we'll work with the arts groups on here. But in addition to that, we do have mail kiosks, of course, for each kind of sub-neighborhood. We have the bike racks we talked about. There's boulders throughout, and often these open spaces incorporate those kind of little informal play locations. We're including benches in a variety of locations, as well as movable seating throughout the neighborhood. So we feel like we've got a pretty good distribution of street furniture and other amenities throughout the neighborhood. Fencing was a topic, as well as how to handle the headlights of cars coming into park in these garages that were down here at the south edge. So we modified our fencing strategy a little bit, still keeping the existing PVC fence along Tract H. We're going to come off those perpendicular at the with each of these lots that have their side facing Tract H with a wood version of the rail fence at a 90-degree angle. And then in those spaces where the driveway comes in, that we'll be placing a berm in here of a minimum height of 3 feet, so that any headlights coming in will be blocked by that berm. We felt that a berm was a more permanent solution than either fence or wall or landscape, because landscape can die. People are unlikely to modify the grade in that area. So each one of these will have a berm in them to assist with that particular element. And then we also spent a lot of time working with staff on the privacy fencing for the cottages, and I'm going to get into that here in a second here. So what we've done on that is, in all cases that are pulled back a minimum of 3 feet from the front and rear corners, and between units. In some cases, they'll be further back because of the way that the wraparound porches work. So there'll be actually some variety along the street in terms of the location of those. And then that's also the case on the ends. They'll be pulled back 3 feet from the ends. And what we've got to is that we have the fence that will be occurring in these short sections are roughly 15% transparent, so they're not fully solid. And then the ones on the ends will be at least 30% transparent around here. But however, in places like where we have an alley intersection, where we have some sightline questions, we'll go to a more transparent kind of mesh solution here. In fact, that photograph right here is from Midtown over in Adams County that had a similar kind of condition where we needed to make sure that people could, as they come up to that intersection, can see through. So I think we're all pretty comfortable with that. 5 feet is the maximum height. So we think we've got that one pretty well addressed as well. And then this is just an illustration of how that berm strategy might work, and then how the other rail fence will just tee directly into the existing fence. Then we've got the question about the view sensitivity area. We've studied that long and hard with the criteria as we understand it. Each of these numbers represent the allowed height relative to the finished grade for each of those. You'll see they range anywhere from 27.5 feet up to 39 feet or so like that. We have a 32-foot height limitation. So pretty quickly after we get out of this area right through here, we don't really have much of an issue there. We do have a need to restrict certain floor plans and certain models on certain lots, particularly lot 46, the one that you specifically called out last time, to make sure that we are in compliance with the view sensitivity area plane. And in addition to that, there will be conditions on those lots that people who purchase those homes won't be able to modify them to violate the view sensitivity area either. And the scenario that Stephen pointed out in his memo is a good one, where somebody might want to try to add on a second floor over a place where there wasn't one. Well, if that violates the view sensitivity area plane, that wouldn't be allowed. So that will be something that would run with the land on those particular lots. And we went through a variety of analysis and shared with Chase all of that information. And I suppose you probably have a desire to see his analysis as well. And we're happy to talk about that further if needed. So that's what I've got for tonight. I think we hit all of the topics, unless you have some that I missed.
Anybody have any questions for Alex before we move a little bit?
Not questions.
Not at this time. Okay. All right, cool. Thank you very much. I'd like, Alex, would you mind, could I pick on you to come up? And I know there's 3 areas that we're all interested in just understanding as best we can. That's the intersection at Superior Drive and Promenade, the alley that they put in place to help reduce the stretch between Superior Drive and what was it? Discovery Parkway. And what about that? And then let's see, it seems like there was one more. Well, start with those 2. I'll think of the other one in a minute.
Sure. So, Promenade Drive, Alex Arnolo, Public Works Director. We wanted to cut down on the long length of a roadway where we're going to have uninterrupted stretch and straight stretch. So this was a key intersection that I was wanting to do some more additional traffic calming, and I think this will probably end up as a 3-way stop, and it's a more natural 3-way stop as you tee into as Promenade comes up and kind of tees into Superior Drive. We want to make a natural stop condition rather than a T stop condition where the head of the T just keeps flying through there. And we've talked about putting some islands in there to also slowing traffic down as it goes
So
through
is this similar? I just finally thought of one I saw. So on 55th in Boulder, as you're getting closer to Cherryville, there's a residential street that comes in.
Yes,
and
on Cherry, it's on Cherry.
Sign, and then
It's on Cherryville.
on Cherryville. That just came. Is this you
Yes.
thinking similar to that?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
So will it for
Put in-
sure
put-
be a 3-way stop?
Yes, it could be a 3-way stop. I think it
I
probably
think we want to go. Will it be? Is it proposed as a 3-way stop right now?
Right now, it's not. Because
Okay.
we built one of these similar in Charlotte, but it wasn't a 3-way stop. And my takeaway was that I would never, ever put a bike lane as part of the traffic calming again, because as a cyclist, you feel like you're being shunted out into the lane as cars are kind of cutting across the bike lane because they've got that extra 6 feet of width to work with.
Right.
So I would really like that to be a 3-way stop.
Yeah. So let's make sure we get that in our.
Right, and I drive through one in Boulder on 26th Street. There's 2 intersections like this. They're both 3-way stops. And normally the bike lanes merge with traffic and go through. with the vehicles, and have a stop condition. So I don't have any problem with a stop condition at this point.
Okay.
And then on the,
One more question, Alex, sorry.
It was a comment, which is I'd like to second Commissioner Miller's point, because I ride up and down Cherryvale quite frequently, and when I get to the area that looks like that, I take to the sidewalk rather than stay on the road.
okay, thank you. Okay, there.
Oh, my other one, Alex, was the Coke was,
Am I going the wrong way?
yeah. Oh.
So we had a long discussion on this one and threw around a lot of ideas. What we were trying to reconcile was the fact that there's no cross streets, there's no other connections between Promenade and Superior for 1,500 feet or so. So we felt this street could end up with some additional traffic just because people would be, going. And remember, we have parking on just one side of the street, so you may want to circle back and so you can park on the right side of the street. So we just felt naturally this street could end up with more traffic than other alleys around. So we wanted to give some additional buffering to these homes because, most of the time when you're on the alley, you're, I think, 6 feet, 3 feet.
Less, like 5 feet or
Less than 5 feet, your garage less than 5 feet from the alley. So alleys, meant to be slow moving. So this could get some additional traffic that you wouldn't normally see on other alleys. So we wanted to give additional buffering. So it created additional setbacks here, and then also provided some additional area for a sidewalk. And this will be more of a street situation with ADA ramps and provide a side pedestrian connection through that alley area. So it was kind of a compromise between an alley. We're going to call it a private street. We don't want to maintain it, but it may function like a street, so it will be called a private street.
Is it a raised cross? So what makes it look like the point of this is that you're coming down Promenade, and it's got to be clear you're coming up on an intersection, right? That's the whole idea, right? To slow people down. What makes that intersection look more like an intersection? We decided this would be more like an intersection rather than an alley.
Yeah, we've removed the commercial.
If you could, just come on up. Thanks.
We removed the commercial style entry.
Could we just get your name on the record?
Oh, yeah. Sure. Yep, that's right.
Tom Odell from CVL Consultants. And made the entries the standard radius for a typical street to make it feel more of the street as opposed to the alleyway.
Because the more typical alley is directly to the north on the other side of Superior?
Correct.
So
Yeah,
from a
okay.
width
That's
and
a good
design,
point.
okay.
You can see the difference between the entries there.
Okay. There's no crosswalk changes. There's no.
Not in that location.
Not in
So
that
just to
location,
the
right.
left in the bottom left corner, you'll see
Yeah.
that's where the raised crosswalk will be.
Okay.
So that
we have
part of
that
this-
in addition.
We have that, so it'll slow traffic for people moving kind of eastbound before you get to this intersection, and then for people moving westbound, it'll just be a
After
right
it.
turn. So
Okay.
Exactly. We'll have a mid-block crossing here and a raised crossing right where the key map's at.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Does this mean that people are going to be driving up and down that street at the same time as other people coming in and out of their garages?
That was the purpose of extending the driveway from the 5-foot typical that we have elsewhere to 8 feet to give a little bit more visual when you're looking down the alleyway. You'll see somebody backing out, have an opportunity to slow down. The same with people backing out of their garage will have an opportunity to see any traffic in the alleyway.
I'm not confident that that's a good solution.
All right. Thank you.
Was there another?
Yeah, the third was Coal Creek Drive and the
Okay.
extension and how Lantern was handled. If you just speak to that. Oh, do you have another?
I have a fourth, but
You have a full, that's right. Yeah, we'll take questions after this is done.
in terms of Coal Creek, again, we gave you a little analysis last week about the volumes of traffic that would be expected on Coal Creek Drive. If this connection is made, if it's made to 88th, we gave you some traffic. I think it's like 3,000 going up to, if Promenade goes to 88th, be about 3,000. Will be about, what, 3,800 if it goes south into Coal Creek Drive. Those numbers may be a little high. We just, Stephen presented some counts of units that have been coming in terms of, if you remember, we have 1,400 dwelling units, and it looks like it may be 1,000 or so. So the traffic counts projections we had made were for the full 1,400. So there could be some drop in the projections that I'd given you last week.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a question, Vince?
I don't know if this is for you or the developer, but I'm looking at the trails and circulation map and the dismount zones. Made me a little curious. Why do we have to call those dismount zones? Are they practically going to be used as dismount zones, or is that going to be a sign that's there for legal reasons, but bicyclists will probably ignore it, which is usually kind of a terrible design, suggests a terrible design. So I'd just like to know more about why we're doing these dismount zones.
The concern that was brought up last week was with the multi-use trail also serving as the front, more or less the front sidewalk for a series of units on both sides of that. Even though it's 10 feet wide as opposed to a 5 feet wide, they're concerned that there might be the potential for conflicts between people coming out of their residence and people using the multi-use trail. And so by at least attempting to get people to dismount, that would reduce those potential conflicts.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for Alex?
I guess, Alex, what is your opinion on that? Do you feel like that's effective? And then do you also think, when I looked at that, I was looking at that as a pretty strong connection up to the bikeway for this neighborhood. Do you feel like most people are going to use on-street to get to the bikeway?
This is the concern we had right in this area here, because both sides, you're coming out your back door, your front door, right into the trail, and we had concern. Why don't you put it down the center and make a better connection for bicyclists? I mean, that was our concern. Put it down the center, but apparently there's some grade issues there that prevents them, and maybe civil engineer can provide some additional information on us. But we were concerned that you have your front door and you walk out into a bike facility. So it's not a great situation, and that's what their suggestion is. I'd rather have a way of separating that walk from the front doors.
Could it be a light separation? Or like just a small separation, the bikes are on one side?
Or maybe, different color concrete, something that demarcates where the bike should go versus where, you walk.
I mean, I think to Ben's point, bikes are going to want to figure out a way to get from that point to that point. So I would encourage, I think, you guys to evaluate, I don't know if it's a smart idea to send the bikes up the alleys either, but maybe, I'm not sure what street that is, to provide a connection, up kind of where the mouse is, or the street, that street there, right? That a connection to that trail from that street. If someone wants to just really if they want to ride through the neighborhood, north to south, we give them a route and a connection.
Yeah, Tom, can you address whether that's physically, can you make that connection to the street over there?
Or could you speak to any other ideas? I mean, even separating that path by a foot from a walk path that guides bikes there and makes it a clear separation. I mean, I don't know what, we're not totally aware of what the grades are there and what the problems are, but now that you've heard what the concern is, could you speak to that too?
Yeah, we could work around the grading issue. I think the intent was not to have 3 separate concrete ways going down that and keeping it more green space, more open space. The connection that we have, though, is at the pedestrian bridge. I feel like that makes the most sense. And not having to route people down an alley, I think that would totally take away from the whole concept that we have with the pedestrian bike trail, north and south.
I think if you make people get off their bikes, they're gonna ride on a street or an alley. So we should give them
Or
a connection.
ignore the sign.
Or ignore the sign.
Or, yeah,
And there wouldn't really be passageway from the alley over to the purple trail there. That would be a landscaped area that wouldn't really be,
Due to grades, or you feasibly, could you not put a connection through there?
you would be going on maybe a 5-to-1 slope through there.
Okay,
over to 7th, over to Street 7, you mean? Or,
yeah, I'm not sure what street it is.
that's Street 7,
yeah.
so the grade is.
Street 7.
You're suggesting somebody would come up and over, or come up the alley and then over?
Uh-huh,
The portion right here wouldn't be great for biking,
okay.
just the natural condition of it.
Okay.
I guess I'd just urge you to continue looking at that, because I think that there's some opportunities to make that better, if that really is a north-south connection to the bikeway.
There are any other questions for staff, the developer, or Alex before I take public comments? The next step will be public comment, and then the developer will have a chance to respond to that. So,
Just maybe one last question. I'm wondering if there is still going to be parking along Promenade where 8th Street was originally proposed. And if so, we might need to look at restricting parking there, since that's going to be a kind of a larger open area, and there may be children playing or pedestrians walking through there. And if there are cars there, my concern is that you have people peeking out between those cars and walking out between the cars.
We
onto Promenade.
we do have on-street parking here, except for where the raised pedestrian crossing is. So there'll be, 3 or 4 cars and maybe a couple of cars here, and then fewer than that over on this side, because the raised pedestrian crossing bulb out there takes up a fair amount of that real estate. So yes, there is parking in both places. There was no parking on Street 8 when we had contemplated that, so there wouldn't have been any on-street parking there anyway. I think I've been told that there's kind of mixed philosophies about parking next to places where kids play. In some cases, you have the same kind of concern that you just raised. Others are that it actually helps create a little bit of a barrier between that and actually moving traffic, so that protects people who are in those kind of park spaces a little bit as well. So, I don't know what the statistical data is on that, but I've heard both of those conversations.
All right, and I'm not sure, so one other question then, is there any kind of physical barrier that will be placed there to keep pedestrians or children from running from that open space to the sidewalk and the street?
I don't have a slide of the landscape plan, but it's a mixture of some turf area, which does come right up to the walk, but also some shrub beds and enhanced native turf, which is going to be less used for play in there. So it varies depending on where you're at in that particular area. So it's a mix.
Okay.
Alex, could you ask you to speak to Anthony's comment about what we think in terms of allowing parking, increasing the buffer on an edge of a park? Because it is a major road, right? Or, it's a major through street.
Park?
Yeah,
I think that's
what are
what
our thoughts?
We can look at it during our construction plans and get some calculations of site distance, or perhaps restrict it around the park to provide better visibility. It will be raised crossings, so the bicyclists will be, higher up with better visibility. But I think it's a good point here that we can, look at the construction plan level to provide.
It looks like it's 3 or 4 spaces. It's not, especially with that raised crosswalk there. And then on the other side, it's probably even a little less.
Can I comment? I think we have a similar situation along the edge of Founders Park. just down the road here, and we allow street parking beside the park there, and it's essentially the same situation you have here.
Way more homes here than we're dealing with Founders Park, but yes, I mean, we don't, there's just not a lot of,
No, but there's
But,
a
yeah,
lot of
similar.
people go use the park, and they park along the edge of the park in
Yeah.
a designated parking
sure,
area.
yeah. Okay, any other questions for? Okay, let's see, so I'd like to take public comment again. We did have public comment at the last meeting, but I know we have a lot of folks here who would like to speak to it, so I'm going to open it up to public comment. We'd like to ask you to keep it under 5 minutes. If you have something identical that somebody else said, you're certainly welcome to support it, but rather than totally repeat it, just for the sake of time, that'll be appreciated. But there's a lights up front here that'll tell you when the yellow light will flash when you're down to a minute, right? So if you could honor that, and when it goes red, that means your 5 minutes is up. So we'll take public comment and raise your hands, and I'll just start picking folks in the back. Yes. And be sure to state, come to the microphone, state your name and your address for the record, and go for it.
Thank you, everybody. I'm Jim Marion. I'm at 910 South Pitkin. I had just a couple brief comments, just briefly about this particular plan with the bike path, with essentially a bad design. If you're going to have to either trust people to read a sign or not get hit when they walk out their door, you may want to even consider reducing a row of homes, which would make it more of a real green space from the bottom to the top in more of a regular width band. And then you would have to have those debates about how to mitigate traffic. But really what I wanted to speak about today is Coal Creek Drive. As I'm on Pitkin, it's not my dog in the show really, but at the same time, you have Amethyst Court is like 5 homes with a cul-de-sac, and you have here traffic mitigation for reduction of speed. But I would really feel orphaned if I was a member of anywhere along Coal Creek Drive and it's not an integrated part of these presentations. My suggestion is do not do anything other than a bike path to connect it. When you look at places like Pearl Street Mall back in the 70s when they're debating it, people thought they were crazy to not have cars be a part of that, yet it's now one of the shining examples of municipal planning in the country. And you have, all these people that are right nearby town center that could easily just take a bike path to do so. Or if they wanted to drive, there's still McCaslin, to get over there. But you don't really have a neighborhood there that was designed for the cars that are going to be zinging through there, as some people try to cut through who live downtown, on their way to work to get to 36 or 88th or get to Monarch or whatever have you. It's going to become a thoroughfare that has houses right next to it. And you have little islands of 5 home, intersections of these little cul-de-sac islands that have nowhere to go but out if they want their kids to play or, get to school or whatnot. So I don't really feel like the city has really thought about the impact to that neighborhood in particular. And, nobody really, I think, enjoyed the whole issue around Waldona and the closure there, right? And God, it was, tore neighborhood apart, neighbor against neighbor. Do you really want to rip the lives of these people apart? When you do this kind of thing, I think it's going to cause a lot of upset people who want it open because it's convenient, people who don't. And, from a political expediency perspective, the safest path for anyone in a political role is the status quo. And so I think you should really consider the fact that maybe it's best not to connect it via cars, but connect it to a pedestrian path. It fits our goal of trying to reduce automobile usage, to foster a greater sense of exercise and community as people have to walk by and wave to neighbors versus just zing by in a car and maybe miss a kid on a skateboard or whatever else. Because I know if I was sitting in your chairs and through my planning efforts, kids were getting hit or hurt by cars zinging by or any pedestrian was hit, I wouldn't want that blood on my hand either. So I would strongly encourage you to think about the neighborhood and the impact that that those car density is going to have on those people as well. So my vote is for a bike path. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, Okay, sorry I showed up late. So this is Coal Creek, right?
Oh, could you please state your name and address?
Sorry,
And
just
then I
wanna
really need
make
you to
sure.
stay at the mic too, because we have to catch on the
I will.
recording, but. yep.
Dulcie Brown, 1404 East Weldona Way. I agree with you. Weldona Way was torn apart. It wasn't handled correctly from the get-go. Why in the world anybody would want to have all that traffic go through this neighborhood? They just put a school crossing right down here for the kids to cross. And now you want how many vehicles? 3,900 vehicles, you think, going through that every day? You're going to have the same problem with this down the road if it's not handled correctly from the get-go. And handled correctly is, don't let this cut through. Bikes, pedestrians, whatever. But these poor people, well, wait a minute here. Wasn't there supposed to be something Lanterns was going to build along the side of 36? And like I said, I'm sorry I came in late. Maybe you guys all discussed that. But wasn't there going to be something along there? Oh, okay. Okay, so that's Lanterns, correct? Correct. All right, and so the new development is just right up that way?
Coal Creek right here. So
Okay, there's Coal Creek.
these are
And,
the connections.
and wasn't the plan what, something was going to connect the town to 88th alongside 36?
The Lanterns development built Coal Creek Crossing to the north property line for that connection. And then we reserved right away where this easement area is indicated in red. But
Okay.
none of that got built. So all of the red, all Lanterns built was what they were required for their development, which was an EVA from this cul-de-sac south.
Okay, and so like I said, I apologize for showing up late, but is there any reason why it can't be built out, the red road, instead of connecting through to Coal Creek and going through the neighborhoods that have existed with, like you said, cul-de-sacs and school crossings? And looks like it's a 4-lane, but now it's been built down to the 2-lane, which is good. And you want all those vehicles going through? So I just don't understand why that can't be developed the way that the last time I talked at the Weldona Way meetings is that's the way it was going to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Yep.
Paul Amirowitz, 967 East Carville Place. Thanks so much. I know you guys have an incredibly hard job. My wife was on the board for 2 terms and went through a lot of this stuff. And she would come home at night and I'd say, is it really worth the $10 you get paid a month to get yelled at all the time? Not really worth it. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you agreeing to build berms at the ends of the alleys. That's one of the things that I wanted to bring up to try to mitigate some of the light situations on the alleys coming into the Carville Place areas. The primary thing I really want to talk about is the view-sensitive area. I'm really not 100% sure from looking at the diagrams here and from reading the original annexation agreement, which we had a lot to do with, honestly, that that's being interpreted correctly. I think when you read the documents, and I'm happy to read from them if you want to, I think you've probably read them over and over and over and over again, that the view-sensitive area states that anywhere from along the south boundary line outwards towards the north, there will be a 4% grade over a 4% raise over a 10% or 10-foot raise. And the last time we were here, this gentleman mentioned, oh, we're gonna cut that hill off by 20 feet. Now, I don't know if it's 20 feet, I don't know if it's 30 feet, I don't know if it's 45 feet, I don't know what that footage is. But until we really see the gradient of what that looks like, of how you're gonna actually grade that down, I can't say that I can agree with how you're doing the view-sensitive area. Because what this looks like is somebody took a plane and a slice of pie and said, we're going to go from here to here, and that's the view-sensitive area. However, in the original annexation agreement, I'm happy to read it if you want me to. I don't think you need me to do it again. That's not the way it's stated at all. So that's my number one consideration, is looking at that and being sure that the town, if you guys are, I'm assuming that you're abiding by the annexation agreement. Is that a bad assumption? Is everybody agreed to abide by the annexation agreement that was put into place in 1988, which we worked really hard to get done? I don't hear a yes. I don't hear a no. Are we agreeing to abide by the annexation agreement that was put into place in 1988?
So, do you want to take a minute and just respond that I know it's tied to the PD? So.
Yeah, I mean, this is, this is kind of, I guess, an issue that, we had addressed to the commission, in one of our memos. In terms of...
It's a very easy question. It's a yes or no question.
Sure. Yeah, so there is... So obviously the annexation agreement is...
it's a yes or
Paul,
no question.
you need to allow him to answer, please, or I'll just have to ask you to sit down. So.
Right, okay. So the annexation agreement obviously has informs this this application. There was also later a PD amendment that would also inform the commission's decision as well. So where the PD amendment would apply, the commission would look to that. Where it otherwise doesn't supersede the annexation agreement, you would look to the annexation agreement. And then any of the other analysis concerning the view-sensitive area, I would just refer the commission to our memo that we sent on that.
Is that memo public? Can we see that memo?
No, that's a confidential legal memo.
Oh, of course. So my other question is, if there was an amendment put in place around a view-sensitive area that said, this is the way we're going to measure that area, and we've chosen maybe not to measure that area, does that open up the town to any kind of... never mind, I won't go down the path. So anyway, that was everything. And then many people actually purchased their homes along those areas, understanding that there was an annexation agreement in place, and that annexation agreement was going to promise them a certain view-sensitive area. And other people early on bought property and paid a lot premium for those properties because of that ideal. So to go back on that is something that is just, I don't know, anathema to the way I like to do business. The other thing that, so I think I've said enough about that. The other thing I'd like to just ask a little bit about, because I don't see it here, is what are the trail connections into the Rock Creek neighborhood, and how does that actually play out?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Yes, Terry.
Good evening, I'm Teresa Clark and I live at 765 East Wiggins here in Superior. And I have a few comments and I do appreciate you listening to them. It's kind of hard for residents to stand up here and make their comments because of the fact that this is already pre-scheduled to go to the Board of Trustees on September 9th. And that's a very strong and clear sign that regardless of what we say, nothing is going to change on this and that it's going to go straight to the board as it is. Nonetheless, we'll stand here and try to have the courageous conversation and make our comments anyway. So my comments are, can you, Stephen, please, can you please put up the slide that had trails circulation in the lower left-hand corner? Okay, great, thank you. So my first comment is, in the other version of this that we saw, there was a park within the natural area wildlife corridor residential buffer, tract H. And I'll go in a little more about the annexation agreement after I make another point of this. And that's also the view-sensitive area that's defined in Section 10 of the annexation agreement. So those are two issues that are very specific to the annexation agreement itself. And just as a reminder, like Mr. Imbirowitz, I won't stand here and read it because I'm sure that everybody's read it at this point in time. But I've gathered a lot of historical knowledge about this, and there were, between 900 and 1,000 residents that signed a petition that actually created the annexation agreement in the first place. And then all of us that live along that southern boundary of this development purchased our houses based on the verbiage of that annexation agreement. I even consulted with a current planning commissioner and trustee member about the interpretation of the 1998 annexation agreement. And as it was explained to me, that the exhibit in the annexation agreement was incorrectly drawn, and that when there's a conflict between the two, we go by the verbiage in the agreement. And Section 10 states that it's a bulk plane line going perpendicular from any point on the southern fence to the north. There's a phrase right before that concerns me though, and it says, if the parties agree. And this is a direct question for the Planning Commission and for Council. Are you agreeing to the definition of the VSA as drawn by the developer in this application?
Dan Kankirk, this is the agreement between the original owners of the property and the new owners of the property. Is that correct?
Right, so that's what the annexation agreement was. The applicants today would be successors in interest. Right, so in terms of this, the language having to do with the agreement, unless they agree otherwise, that's where I referred to the PD amendment. So what the town did was they made a third amendment. I don't have the year. Which essentially modified that language within the annexation agreement itself. So what planning commissions should essentially look at would be PDA 3, where the PDA has modified any of the language within the annexation agreement concerning that language. Does that make sense?
The parties' discussion and their agreement.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I don't know if that answers your question, but our discussion needs to be with the attorney. I wanted to make sure we understood. So
Okay,
I sort of asked your question.
That doesn't answer my question. It was kind of a yes or no. It's either going to be you're agreeing to interpret it as it's drawn in the FDP, or you're not. So that's one of the questions. The third thing that I wanted to bring up is this piece here that says access to town center with the arrow drawn next to it. That line is suspiciously close to the cul-de-sacs of East Wiggins and East Carville. And there has been a petition circulated through the neighborhoods of encompassing the Waterford Estates, which is East Carville, Brandon, and Wiley, and then Carville and Pitkin. So it included both ends of where that line cuts down the middle. Fully 80% of the residents signed the petition strongly opposing any trail connection going between the cul-de-sacs of Carville and Pitkin.
Is that part of this PD, Stephen?
There's no connection.
Okay.
Well, this line is suspiciously drawn
It's not part.
with an arrow to it.
It's not part of this PD. So
Okay.
if it happens, it's not through this PD.
Okay. All right, so I talked about the VSA and no park, and my personal feelings are that for you to honor anything that is not in the annexation agreement isn't just a betrayal of the people that put that together and that fought well before we came along. We're standing on the shoulders of giants who made that agreement, but it's a betrayal of the people who purchased their houses on it, based on it too. And then finally, the Coal Creek connection. So I did a little research on this, and I looked at Municipal Code 16-7-30. And at the end of the code, I'll let you guys read it all too, but I'm just going to read a short little statement at the end. It says, but connection shall not be permitted where the effect would be to encourage the use of such streets by substantial through traffic. And a Coal Creek connection, 3,800 cars, that's substantial through traffic. And it is going to orphan any of the neighborhoods that are on the east side of Coal Creek. So I thank you for your time, and I hope that you will modify your opinions based on what your residents want. Thanks again.
Any other public comment? Yeah, Joe?
Hello, I'm Joe Sorelli. Live on East Carville Place in Superior, which is immediately south of this development. Participant in the development of the annexation agreement, a participant on the Planning Commission for maybe 8 or 9 years, on the town board for 9 years. So I've got some concerns about what I'm seeing here, and I'd like to echo a couple of points. First of all, what Mr. Mbirowitz said regarding grading plan is extremely important, because and we don't know what that is, but the view sensitive area from the annexation agreement, which the master developer assured the town at the time when they were applying for approval of the first PD amendment, was that they would comply with the annexation agreement. The only, with respect to the annexation agreement, the only area that I can remember where that got amended by PDA 3 was where the Coal Creek, or the, what do you call it now, the Coal Creek Drive connection cut in front of the pond, and so it cut into the area that we were supposed to have as protected. And since that time, that apparently is changed, but I'm not sure anything in the PDA 3 addressed the view sensitive area regarding the heights, and I can't recite what PDA 3 says about that. But nothing, even building heights should not be interpreted as amending that PDA 3 if the building height were to exceed the view sensitive area. That's my view. So I agree with my two preceding commenters regarding that, and I think it's important that this be enforced. And I might add, the view sensitive area, having been involved in it at the time, was proposed by the property owner seeking to be annexed, because there was such opposition to the annexation that there was a very good chance that the property might not have been annexed. And that was proposed by the property owner and the successive property owners. Anyway, the next point I have a concern about is the Coal Creek Drive connection, and that is our transportation plan is always, it is never committed to a Coal Creek Drive connection. It's always been, well, maybe we want it, maybe we don't. But one of the things that was always part of the transportation plan was that it would always have, if connected, would be traffic calming throughout the connection, so as to prevent it from being essentially the concern was a frontage road, but a throughway for people to get around, to get through town. And I'm not sure how we're addressing traffic calming. From what I see here, I wasn't at the prior meeting. The only thing I've seen tonight is that little buckle where Superior and Promenade meet. And so there should be, speed limits of not more than 25, and, whatever other traffic calming should be involved and not encourage that as a through street to avoid the main collector roads. That's the comments I have.
Joe, I'm going to break protocol and ask you a question.
Sure.
You know, I think folks who've been familiar with the annexation agreement for a long time, such as yourself, have always relied on the diagram. And I think the context around it was always, well, that line points to Longs Peak, and everything to the south of Longs Peak is the area that everyone is protecting. And I think, kind of some recent review of the language may or may not suggest otherwise, but I'm curious what your thoughts on that are. How to reconcile the exhibit versus, this different view of the language.
I never, I can't resolve the diagram and the language, frankly. Everybody's concerned about the view of the mountains, primarily. And, but the language is clear that it's a 90-degree angle from the southern portion of each particular point you measure. So I always looked at Longs Peak as my point of view as to where I'm looking for the view sensitive area. But then again, there were that is sensitive to each home along the way too. So,
Thank you. Okay. Any other public comment? Yes.
My name is China Leonard. I live at 547 South Brandon Court. And the things that I wanted to speak about are basically have been spoken by Mr. Umbirowitz, Teresa Clark, and Mr. Sorelli. But it's primarily focused on the visual corridor. I've lived in Rock Creek for 27 years, and that was a very important reason why we bought our property. We paid a prime price for where it is and for the view that we were supposed to have indefinitely. So I would just like to express my support for that. I find it disturbing that that original residents of Superior's interests seem to be going by the wayside and compromised by some of the new development. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment? No? Okay, thank you. Let's see, does the applicant wish to respond to comments that were brought up?
I can certainly respond to at least some of the comments here.
If you just restate your name.
I'm sorry, David Williams, DTJ Design, 3101 Iris, Boulder, Colorado. First topic had to do with the bike path, where we're suggesting the dismount area. Certainly, we're willing to explore some other alternatives if that becomes a big topic. I personally am not certain that the number of residents coming out of those compared to the number of bicyclists that are going to be coming through there is going to be a huge conflict, but we're absolutely willing to take a look at another alternative. And it just will likely mean less green space and more concrete by the time we're done. So, but we'll look at that. I'm not going to address the Coal Creek connection because that's something that we've been working with staff on in terms of how we're to address that, and we think we've accommodated whatever the town decides it's going to do with that area. As far as the comment regarding this note right here, the note that says access to town center, that was intended to be a note associated with the path that runs through tract H. It wasn't pointing at a specific, that dashed line. In fact, I think that dashed line represents something else altogether. It really was more just to represent that north-south, or I'm sorry, that east-west connection in the tract H was going to be a good opportunity for all residents. And then as far as the view-sensitive area, as I've mentioned before, We believe we've been addressing it exactly the way it's been dictated to us, and we believe we comply with it. And so, and with the restrictions that we've imposed on certain lots and with certain buildings to make sure that, as well as future construction that might be contemplated on some of those lots or additions to those homes to be put in place. So we're pretty confident that we're complying with everything that we are supposed to be playing by. And I believe those were the comments that I can address. Did I miss anything?
No, I just want to back you up on that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Bill Janks, RC Superior. Thanks again for taking the time and the careful consideration. I just wanted to second the comment on the VSA, and I'm troubled by the residents' belief or understanding that we're violating the VSA in any way. We are absolutely not intending to violate the VSA in any way. I think it might be helpful, again, if you'd like to see Chase's model. I know he has the VSA very accurately modeled with the correct language and bulk plan as it's written in the original annexation agreement, which you'll see exactly how far each home is below that. As Dave mentioned earlier in the presentation, those homes in the southeast corner of the VSA are the only ones that are close to that height limit, and where the VSA actually clips under the 32-foot height limit established by the PD. To answer Mr. Sorelli's comment, the height limits absolutely do not override the VSA height limits. So that's a perfect example where the VSA bulk plane clips the 32-foot, what would otherwise be a 32-foot height limit. Toll is lowering those homes to a maximum of 27 or whatever they need to be to fit under that VSA plane. So I just want to reiterate, we are absolutely respecting the VSA and the bulk plane line as described in the annexation agreement.
Thank you. Anybody want to see the model? I know the two of you weren't here for this, probably saw it on video, but you mind just showing us that portion of the...
Chase Mullen with MIG.
Phyllis, can you toggle over to his computer for us?
And so for residents who haven't seen this, Chase puts together 3D models, and they've spent quite a bit of time this week just trying to make sure we can look at this.
So Commissioners, if I could just clarify kind of the point concerning the VSA and the annexation agreement. The interpretation, from the beginning has been that, the language itself states that unless otherwise agreed by the party, the building heights within the VSA shall not exceed the bulk plane line drawn over the property. And then the annexation agreement refers to the exhibits B and C. So again, it's not a 90-degree angle, but it shall not exceed the 90-degree angle. So it's our interpretation in looking at that the application as stated would be compliant with the interpretation that we've consistently had for the VSA. That hasn't changed. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that point with you.
And then the model we're going to see is representative.
Right, and it's also compliant with the PD as well.
Okay. Stephen, did you have something else?
I guess just to kind of state it differently, the VSA has always been interpreted throughout the PD consistently, and we're applying the same VSA triangle that Chase is now reflecting. So it is drawn at an angle. It's been consistently drawn at that angle since the PD was adopted, and it's been consistently applied to all of our applications with this model and with this in this configuration. So the other thing I guess I'd clarify is that we've gone to great lengths. This is the first application where the VSA is actually more restrictive than the height allowances out here. And so it's instead of usually what you do is you go from base and you have 32 feet or whatever the height requirement is up. We actually have a ceiling that we're having to stay underneath. And so the illustrations you guys saw earlier reflected heights that were less than what the 32-foot or the 55-foot allowance would afford. And oftentimes toll isn't there yet because they're not asking for the max height. So we've gone beyond what toll's looking for, and we're actually looking down the road to clarify now so that people that are buying these lots are looking to, maybe make an addition or something in the future. They know that there's a lesser height allowance out here. So So, I mean, the VSA is being followed, and in certain instances, it's actually more limiting than the height allowance that the PD granted.
We continued this hearing partly because we were concerned about grades, and those have been resolved.
Right, and then I guess I want to call him Trustee Sorelli, but Mr. Sorelli's comment about the grades, those grades are in here. So what Toll's given us as far as their final grades are reflected, that's where Chase has set the homes, and then we've, whatever their height proposed, all of these units are different heights, whatever, and some of them aren't set yet. So we've gone through on the course of, where we have a lot that says that it's more restrictive than the 32 feet, we've gone through and figured out, whether or not all of their models or one of their models or, can actually fit on those lots. And then we've adopted conditions to ensure that Toll's application is compliant as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Harper.
Thank you. Like the other members of the commission, I did receive an email from Terry Clark about this issue, and I corresponded with Town Planner Williams about it. From our discussion, I believe that the heights on that plane are indeed fixed based on the perpendicular line from the south border. They're not calculated along the line of the VSA. The VSA line, which goes from the corner of Lot 7 towards Long's Peak, is one line that determines the extent of the view-sensitive area, but the heights in that plane are actually determined by lines that are drawn perpendicular to the south border, which is exactly what the annexation agreement says.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and if I can, I just want to try to help clarify a little bit, and I hope I am helping and not hurting, but just to help kind of with the definitions, the view-sensitive area is a land area. Looking at a plan, looking at a map, where the bulk plane takes effect. So when you look straight down at this on a map, the view-sensitive area is that triangle established in Exhibit B of the original annexation agreement. That's just the land area. That is the view-sensitive area where these rules apply. When you go to the next sentence in the annexation agreement, it says, basically within that view-sensitive area, nothing shall exceed this bulk plane. And this bulk plane is defined as the area as this plane that he's showing, where you start at this property line, go up 10 feet, and then go perpendicular to the property line up 4 degrees. That creates a plane that he's showing in blue here. So that's a 3D plane that goes over the entire view-sensitive area that limits the height of those homes. And that's exactly how this has been calculated. And you can see, except for that one southeast corner, that the bulk plane in the view-sensitive area is actually well above most of these homes. And that's where we all agree that we have no issue and no breach of the view-sensitive area rules.
And Commissioners, just one further clarification, and where the annexation agreement actually refers to southern property line, it doesn't, our interpretation of it is that it's not, a true south interpretation. It's actually the southern property line that's included within the annexation agreement. So I just wanted to point out that specification as well.
Yeah, so that bulk plane line that you draw at 90 degrees is actually a couple degrees off true north. And you see that on the exhibit when you draw those lines.
Anybody want to see any different angles that Chase has not shown us yet? Okay, good. All right, we done with Chase then too? Okay. I think we're good. Thank you very much, Chase. Appreciate you doing that. So at this point, if we have questions for staff and somewhat to the developer, I can allow those to go, and then next step would be to close the public hearing, continue our discussion, and decide how we're going to proceed. So, questions?
I have a question for staff. First of all, I appreciate your memo and clearly saying, here was the issue, here's what we've done, and then staff's response. I thought that was really helpful. And then you've also provided us a draft resolution. Can you confirm if the conditions in here, I didn't have a chance to read everyone closely, match, where you have no concern, it matches the application, but if you had concern, does it reflect staff's preference, or does this reflect what the applicant presented. Do you have additional concerns above and beyond what's in this resolution? I guess is what I'm asking.
Oh, the only thing I guess we could potentially add, I think it's comprehensive of everything.
Okay.
It was only done in the last 24 hours. Actually, this resolution was only done this afternoon. I think it's comprehensive. If you guys notice anything, and I can skim through the changes here, but I think it's, the thing is I broke up these. It would be cleaner if there was just 11 of them, but there's not, because I think that it just reads easier when you separate them out. So there's different conditions that we're doing to address everything, but and we talked to Toll today. I think we're in agreement, and I don't think there's anything that they have issue with in terms of the conditions that we've applied. They haven't seen the memo, but it's all, I mean, they've seen the addendum. They haven't seen the actual conditions in the resolution, and I think generally it's their goal to have this stuff addressed before their next submittal to the board.
Yeah, and just for clarification, the conditions actually reflect staff's recommendations.
Okay, that's what I
Right.
wondered, if it was
Right.
what was in theirs and in cases where maybe staff
Right.
was suggesting further changes.
No, I mean, there's nothing, further, I guess. It's just, this is, in lieu of actually having an FDP with
Right.
changes. They didn't
No,
want to, so it's a little.
Didn't your memo have though, like, on the, like, maybe
There's a couple, yeah.
they proposed, this as far as, mixture of unit types, but you had,
Their unit mixture is coming from them. So but previously it did, but now everything that they've basically agreed to everything that we've kind of suggested.
you're
Yep.
comfortable,
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. The only thing that we might want to add, I guess, I had a note from earlier on, one of them was to have that stop at Promenade, or that intersection at Promenade and Discovery actually be a stopped intersection. So that's changed to condition E. And then whether or not you want to make some friendly amendment or add another condition to address the kind of the bike lane or the multimodal trail where the bikes might be in conflict with those residential areas. Considering we have a 10-foot wide trail through there, I think that you could probably get a 5-foot wide sidewalk and a 6-foot wide trail, and we could put, a foot of separation between it, or just stripe it differently, or however we want to kind of treat that in order to separate those two out, so.
Right, and obviously, as the commission knows, these conditions, it's up to the commission whether to, approve with conditions and deny. This was just kind of a way of laying out staff's recommendation so that you could at least see some draft language and have some language to work with. Okay.
Yeah, it's a draft. If you guys have any changes,
Right.
then let us know.
The other addition was the consideration of the stop sign at Superior and Promenade. That was one. He also, I went through here and there were a couple places where Stephen had a little bit of trouble. One was regarding he basically said staff is generally supportive of the approach. Let's see, this is under what section is this? The residential product variety for cottages and homes. So I've got that highlighted. He said staff is generally supportive of the approach, but feel that with the number of alleys and paseos proposed, the tolls, color, and material restriction should not just be limited to streets, but should also include the alleys and the open grass paseos.
Oh, that's
right?
true. Yep.
So that was one.
Yep.
That was one that he suggested we look at. There was a transparency. I think I highlighted that, so I made sure, but that was covered. So I think I understood that. I think that was the only exception that he had.
Right, so that's a good point, and I'd forgotten about that. So I think that their conditions for their cottages are fine. It's just the townhome units. So there's some instances where we have like 2 A3 buildings or 2 C5 or whatever these units are next to each other, and we wouldn't want, so right now it basically restricts them from being, across the street from one another. There's instances where they're across an alley from one another, or they're across a paseo from one another, and I think you'd want the same.
Yeah, just have the same,
restriction.
have the same restriction. Okay. And Commissioner Harper, did you have something?
Yes. In the interest of full disclosure, and I'm sorry I'm not here, there are a couple of facets of this plan that I'm actually concerned about or even opposed to. If you would like those to be in the public comment, that's fine. If you would prefer them to be in discussion, I'm quite happy.
Probably discussion at this point. This is for questions from staff, and so when we get into discussion, that'll be the time to talk about the things you like and don't like, and whether you want to convince the commission to address them or not. So, yeah, because we do want to hear them.
some questions for Alex, if that's okay.
Yep.
I think just so everyone knows, I've always been on record as supporting the Coal Creek Drive connection. I'm on one of the islands. I live on East Riverbend. I'm east of Coal Creek Drive. My only access into my neighborhood is from Coal Creek Drive. So I'm directly affected by that. So I understand the issue and have given it careful consideration as I previously lived on Amherst. Again, only access. So I've lived off that street for 10 years. But I'm curious though how Coal Creek Drive maybe compares to other streets within our community, and do we feel like we have safety issues on those? And I'm thinking specifically maybe of Indiana, which actually fronts two schools front Indiana. From a traffic volume perspective, the 2014 counts look like they're pretty roughly the same as maybe what you're projecting on Coal Creek Drive. And it feels like as a town, we've been able to, effectively manage the safety and the pedestrian access to and from those schools. And we haven't heard neighborhood concern, over those. Are we confident that this is a safe situation?
Sure. Couple things. Comparison for traffic volumes. Indiana, carries between 2,000 vehicles a day to about 3,000 vehicles a day. So it's kind of comparable. It's a 3-lane section in parts where we have a center turn lane, similar to what Coal Creek Drive is. Rock Creek Parkway ranges from 8,000 to 10,000. 88th Street, 2-lane roadway, has 9 or 10,000 vehicles a day. McCaslin has, on the south end, about 9,500. On the north end, about 20,000. Coal Creek Drive along Original Superior has about 1,200 on one end and 600 on the other end. So those are the types of facilities that are comparable. I would like to make a comment about the code. There was comments that we're violating our code, section 16, 17, 13, and there's actually 3 parts of it. One is the street system development should be coordinated with existing and proposed developments, and I think we have coordinated with lanterns in terms of the connections. Collector streets shall intersect with surrounding collector or arterial streets at safe and convenient locations. So Collector Street connect to collectors, and basically promenade going through there is it's a collector. We don't have any back out driveways. We have separated sidewalks. We have bike lanes. It's a different type of collector. It's not a major collector that's designed for 4 lanes of traffic. We know we're only going to have 2 lanes of traffic, and we're attempting to provide traffic calming all along the portion within Toll Brothers to discourage, through traffic from outside our community going through there. And then the last section that was quoted, and was only the second clause, was sub-collector, local and minor residential streets shall connect with surrounding streets where necessary to permit the convenient movement of traffic between residential neighborhoods or to facilitate access to neighborhoods by emergency service vehicles or for other sufficient reasons. But connections on these streets, on locals and sub-collectors, shall not be permitted where the effect would be to encourage the use of such streets by substantial through traffic. And so the comments that have been made is that we're violating that section. We're not connecting a collector street to a local street where we're pouring traffic down like on what we have with Waldona, where traffic was a sub-collector street and we had a lot of through traffic on it. We're connecting 2 collector streets. One collector street is nice and wide, designed for 4 lanes. It's always been designed as a collector street. We have committed for that portion of Coal Creek Drive to do traffic calming because it's very wide, it's very hard to cross. We're committed if this connection that goes through to doing traffic calming along there. Along Promenade within Toll Brothers, we've done our best to provide traffic calming, keep the speeds down, and allow traffic to go through there, but at a reduced rate. It's not 35, 40 miles an hour, it's 25, and we're designing for 25.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that was a good point, though, about emergency access, into and out of this. And you think about the location of the hospital relative to, town center, and it seems like a serious consideration to allowing Coal Creek to connect just for quicker access rather than forcing it all the way through Marshall, McCaslin, over the DDI, McCaslin, Dillon, and then all the way around to get to the hospital. So I think that is a pretty important consideration on the connection as well.
Did you have questions or?
Yeah,
Again, this isn't, we'll use discussion for comments and everything. This should be more about questions, getting our questions answered.
I think this is a question for the town. And trying to think of preventing future issues where someone's surprised by us making a street connection that was on a plan. You know, I see we talk about a Central Parkway extension across US 36 to Louisville. If the town is serious about that, should we not be requiring some sort of disclosures, easements, or something of the home buyers in this area so we don't have them coming back to a future planning commission saying, I bought my house, I didn't know about this connection. I don't know, just trying to think ahead of time. So I assume you're talking about Central Parkway and that connection over US 36. We have right-of-way dedicated to here, and the rest of this is part of tract D1. We did do, something comparable to what you're suggesting with lanterns and getting a right-of-way dedication through the rest of it, and we could get that as well. If it is suggested by you guys. I think that it's fairly clear. We have labels and we could add more labels to the FDP plan sheets if we want to. It's really just these units, I assume, that, might not know. But I think the fact that you're building this road and, you have a pretty clear indication that it's there to connect to something. Otherwise, it just kind of ends. That's where the sidewalk ends. But if you want more, we're certainly able to provide more or get the right-of-way dedication now. I think the plan is, Central Park doesn't have an FDP yet, so that's coming in, I think, probably next year. And we'll, we could plat that then if we needed to. But if we want to plat it now or the right-of-way, it is part of the plat application. We could get it now, so. Yeah. And my concern is not necessarily the platting. The concern is having home buyers acknowledge they know they're buying next to a street that's going to be connected. Yeah, I mean, I guess it wasn't as prominent on my mind. They're knowing that they're buying next to US 36, but we can certainly add something. So.
And I just to speak a little bit on the behalf of the town side, having been here since 1997, moving into original town long before the marketplace in Sagamore, the information that's available to residents today is so far beyond what it was. I mean, we inquired, we looked, we tried to figure out, and the marketplace wasn't there yet. There were discussions about doing things and people were talking about stuff, but we knew that across the street was private property and zoning changes happen, and so in fact some of it wasn't annexed. So just from that side, I think the town has done amazing things to make sure that there's a lot of information available to residents. We pushed for that really early on, and I believe they've answered that call well beyond what I ever expected, as years go by. But so, but I agree. We continue to challenge it and make sure things are really as clear as we can make them, and.
I think it's a good point. We can get them to add, clarification on their FDP sheets, just like we did on the lanterns one that says potential, US 36 overpass or something.
Yeah, if that's in the FDP, else, that's in public record. It's there and it's available. Yeah. So no, I agree. Any other questions for the applicant or for anyone on staff? Next step is to close the public hearing. Did you have something?
Sorry. Say the applicant, have you had a chance to review the resolution? Do you have any concerns with any of the language that you feel like you can't comply with before the town board?
Greg Say with Toll Brothers. As Stephen mentioned, I haven't actually seen the final resolution, but we do have the conditions that we discussed earlier today, and we're agreeable to those.
But as far as what was in his memo, all was good. Okay. Right. Okay, if there aren't any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing so we can have discussion. Yeah. Yes, 100%. Okay, public hearing's closed. All right, so this is our opportunity just to discuss all the issues we're dealing with. Commissioner Harper, you had some things. I know Anthony has some things. I'm going to let Anthony had some from last week that I know he wants to bring up and talk about. So why don't we, that seems like a good place to start.
Thank you, Chairman McCool. So there are a couple of things that I'd like to bring up. I want to say first that I'm generally supportive of this application, and that I would like to see us move forward on this evening. There are a couple of concerns that I have, and they may need to be addressed in a way that's satisfactory to everyone. But the first is the needing some type of barrier on the Paseo or Greenway that was once 8th Street. I do feel strongly about that, and think that that is a potential safety issue, even though there is a raised crosswalk and things like that, and striping and signs that will be placed there. But I do think that that's an issue.
Like something like a wooden fence or something.
Something as simple as a wooden fence, or maybe vegetation, something natural, just something to separate and to act as a barrier between that
to
street.
maybe go through a walkway to.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Can you, sorry, I'm not picturing where exactly you're concerned.
Oh, can you bring up?
Pull up the,
yeah.
I'm not picturing it.
It's right here.
That is correct.
So you want something to kind of block that park?
At the
Okay.
edges there, between the sidewalk
Oh,
and the
sorry,
street.
I thought you were talking about the private alley or the private street. Never mind, I'm, okay, I got you.
No, I think that having that is the private alley, the private street is a good resolution to getting rid of that street. I'd also like to see no parking along that area. And I know that there is probably some arguments in favor of and against not having that. But I think, once again, that's a long enough street, and that there is the potential to get up enough speed there to have people dart out between cars. And I think we need to be proactive in addressing that. So that's the other, one of the other issues that I had. I think that would also give, having no parking there would give some increased and improved visibility along that way. So, you know, one of the things that I would encourage is to have no parking signs there, and not have parking there at all. Other than that, I think a lot of the other issues that we came up with and that we had last week have been addressed, at least adequately for myself. I think that there were some good adjustments made, and the changes that are reflected in this resolution, I feel supportive of.
Thank you. Commissioner Harper, do you want to?
Well, my concerns start at a rather higher level. As you know, we all got a huge amount of documentation on this FDP. There were, I figured, about 81 pages of memos, 114 drawings, 79 pages of slides, and then after I sort of gasped at that, we ended up sitting through the 4 hours of video. So, I mean, to be honest, I was rather at a loss at where to start in reviewing this project. So I actually went back and looked at the Superior Town Centre Design Guide to see what it said about this area. It's addressed in a couple of places. Section 1.6 says that planning area 3 is the transition neighbourhood. It includes lower intensity residential, recreation, educational, and commercial uses oriented to the extension of Coal Creek Drive. This theme is picked up in Appendix A1, which says the residual products, and then which is talking about the kind of housing. And this, in addition, there will be freestanding offices, retail, office over retail, and live-work offices, property types oriented with parks, playfields, and a site for a preschool facility. Those are basically the flex spaces that were in the original plan. In effect, I mean, it seemed to me that the goal there was to create a village to go with the village green that we're building in the middle here. I mean, if you think about it, this makes sense because particularly I think the cottages are likely to be occupied by older people downsizing. I'm somewhat generalizing from the area I live in, but I think that's quite often what goes on in these areas. Who will want, if they're typical places to walk their dogs, meet for coffee, buy a tube of toothpaste, and so on. And even the younger people who move in there will be older by the time the trees in that area are mature. The current proposal doesn't seem to incorporate any of these features anymore. All the flex space is being converted to residential use, and the only park that's been built there is the irrigation easement, which cannot actually be built on anyway. I mean, what I feel is happening here is that this is being turned from a cottage area into something that's more, the cottage area in this development is being turned into something that's more like a dormitory town than a village. And I think that's a step backwards. I have a couple of particular issues around it. I mean, one of the guidelines or rules, if it is, in the town guidelines says that blocks should be of 200 to 500 feet, and if they're in the town center, there should be breaks at 300 feet to provide passage. If you measure the distance down the length of Promenade Drive from one end to the other there to the curve, it's over 4,000 feet. That's 3/4 of a mile. If you look at it, there's the break where Discovery Parkway comes in. There's a break for where the old irrigation easement goes across, and there's 2 breaks for alleyways for people to get access to their garages. In addition, so that's basically 1 break every 1,000 feet, which is at least twice the amount that's recommended in our design guidelines. And however beautiful those houses might look, I think they look a lot more beautiful if there were indeed more breaks in that block. I think the same thing is true of Block 19, which is all houses. I mean, there's no access from the houses facing north-south to the park at all. I mean, the way I figured it ended up looking like this was that if you asked me to describe this is a row of very upscale terrace houses that would be quite attractive if they were in a city, but they aren't anything like the cottages in any village that I've ever seen. There's a couple of practical issues that are also addressed in the thing that we've talked a little about fences. The requirement for fences that face on public rights-of-way is that they be a 60-inch of maximum height adjacent to public rights-of-way. They're supposed to be constructed of aluminum, iron, and masonry, and wood, PVC, and wood, I guess I should emphasize, PVC and chain link are prohibited. This is supposed to be a scheme that fits the whole town, not just this particular development. Another item that actually Chairman McCool asked about in the last meeting was public art. Again, according to the design guidelines, public art is actually required. The section involved talks about being incorporated into building facades. It may include sculptures, water features, fountains, and even murals. I think the only reference I heard to art in this presentation was to do with some mining references in the features in the park there. I mean, I understand the desire to build residential housing, but to me, this development plan has really retreated from the concepts that are in the design guide, the vision that's laid out there. And I think because it's such a large area in downtown, it should conform to them more strongly than it does at the moment. I don't really support that area the way it's done at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Chair, you have anything?
Commissioner Harper's correct. This is an enormous amount of information. In general, I'm in support of this resolution. I want to thank the developer and the Toll Brothers folks for listening to us and hearing our request from last meeting. And I hear everyone's concerns, but I feel that this has been worked over enough, and I'd like to move on with it.
Agreed.
That's your comment?
Similar to everyone else, I'm in support, and I really appreciate all of Stephen's effort and the developers' efforts to address all our comments so quickly.
Ben?
So yeah, I listened to the whole video, and I think you guys made a lot of same comments I would have made last week. And I think, like Commissioner Malia said, they were pretty well addressed. My only request is that stop sign on Promenade, and to remove that sign for dismounting bikes, because I don't think people pay attention to it, and you're just asking for trouble. But other than that, yeah, I think it's a fairly good product. I would love these kinds of products to come with more commercial, to the shop you walk to, that sort of thing. I just don't think that's realistic in this day and age when people order their toothpaste from Amazon. So it's not something I'm willing to dictate on a product like this. So yeah, I'm ready to vote.
If I can just add to, in addition to that, I think when we're talking about the overall village feel, and my impression is that we're talking about the entire development, and that there are going to be that work flex space that will come to downtown. It's just not necessarily located in this project. But, you know, if you look at all of the design guides, I think that there is room there for a lot of what you're asking for, and a lot of what you're suggesting, and a lot of what we've been promised. And, you know, I feel like that is coming, but it's not necessarily meant to be in this development.
Phyllis?
Yeah, I just agree with most everything everybody said. I think it's, you know, let's move forward with it.
And I agree.
Cool. I've got one more comment. The VSA was a big topic for a lot of people, and I see that the Toll Brothers and our video guy here have heard that and have kept under that plane. I don't see where that agreement's been violated. And I understand it's very sensitive, and I would be too if that was part of my property. But I don't see where it's been violated.
Okay. Yes, I'm very happy that you went back and worked this last week as hard as you did and addressed all the things that we brought up. Thank you for getting that done. I was a little worried earlier in the week, but when I saw the report and the presentations, and thank you for addressing all those. Just really don't want to send things off to the board that aren't fully baked and ready. So thank you for doing that. I mean, I'm generally supportive of this. I agree. You know, I read through the design guidelines as well as I read through this, and the flex space piece did stick out to me. I would have loved to see that. I'm not required that they do that. You know, our overall residential count is going to be less than what we even recommended, even filling this with the amount of residential that's in there. I'm not a huge fan of this tall product, but it's what's selling. It's, you know, that's the prerogative of the developer, I think, to do that. Our responsibility as a commission is to make sure that it's following the PD and, you know, make a recommendation to the board. That said, we have a number of things that are in the conditions. So I guess first question for everybody is that the conditions that Stephen put forward to us, are there any concerns with those? The only one that Stephen had a concern about within his own comments was related to making sure that the one of you quoted Stephen, find the document.
It's under 6. That's within residential product varieties. It's within 6. It's under the residential product variety, and it's related to the townhomes. So
Yeah.
adding something that clarifies that that adjacent and, townhomes that are actually across paseos or alleys from one another are have different color and material finishes. And that can be added to, which I don't have my copy anymore.
Yeah, where is that in the resolution? Do you know?
It would be, yeah, it would be right after K, so we'd probably put something in between K and L. Because that's related to the townhome requirement. Unless we have or that's related to the cottage requirement, and we're
Let's see.
getting one for the townhomes.
So in general, let's see, is that, so you had requested some additional assurances that Toll's color and material schemes would be varied. They've responded by adding a note to their enhanced. So you didn't
So
put
we'd
this at
follow it
all.
right after G, I think, because that's related to the townhome. So we'd probably put something between G and H and just clarify that, similar to what we have language-wise for.
So you didn't address it all, even with streets, the variation in the color schemes and the enhancement of the end units. Let's see. Hang on. So do you want to propose some language, Stephen? Because I'm struggling to.
Yeah, it would just be that we clarify probably on the same plan sheet 51, that,
Okay.
that townhome buildings that are either across the street, adjacent to one another, or across alley or paseo have different color and material finishes, so. Are you typing as we go?
All right.
Okay.
And then the things that have come up with all of us. So stop sign at Promenade and Superior Drive. Is there anybody opposed to doing that? All right, so.
So we just
we want to
amend-
add that as a condition?
Just amend E to.
Or as I would, or a raised intersection there. I would say that's up to the town and the petitioner, but I would take either one.
Well, we can do either one. I mean, so we can state it or we can leave it up to the town.
I think
to-
the medians are what's doing the traffic calming there, so I don't think we need a raised intersection. So I think it's going to be a stopped intersection is according to what Alex
I'm gonna
recommended.
address it. So just to, and then to include a stop sign in E.
Yeah, a three-way stop.
Right. Let's see. There was a question of another stop sign along Promenade. Is that true or no?
No.
Let's see. We do have the Coal Creek connection, right? So that's a big one. That's currently in the plan as it sits today. Correct?
Yeah, so I mean, so two of the things that got pulled from this, just to, what we didn't really touch on tonight, but it's in the memo, is that, the landscaping along Tract H is no longer a condition. It's just a recommendation that we're going to make to the town board. And so we'd like planning commission's input on that as well as the park amenity being included. So instead of those being conditions of the approval, there's just recommendations from staff for the board to consider at that hearing.
Didn't you pull that out?
I pulled it out of the condition, so the staff memo will be updated to just have a recommendation versus a requirement. But if you guys have any thoughts, and certainly I'm sure the board would want to know whether or not you're supportive of landscaping or supportive of a park, or would prefer otherwise. So if you have thoughts on that.
Tract H Park, Tract H.
It won't be a condition. It's separate from what we're talking about in terms of the resolution, but if you guys want to comment on that, that would be helpful.
My thought on the park is that we continue to explore a park north of Rock Creek Parkway, you know, in conjunction with ProStack and the town board and public input. And this could be a possible location.
I'm supportive of the, yeah, it's not making it part of this PD or a requirement, but just passing on in our notes to suggest we continue to look at it and get resident input and feedback. I think, you know, also the idea of a trail connections into Rock Creek. I mean, I think that falls into that kind of that area of Tract H as well. There's some residents who are in support of it, some residents who are not, depending on where they live. And we heard both tonight, so.
I also would agree with that and be supportive of that. I think we, you know, we continue to get information about that and resident involvement and input.
Okay. All right. Landscaping on Tract H, that was the other, right?
Yeah.
Is that along the, you mean just?
In addition to the berms.
In addition to the berms?
Yep.
I mean, I would be concerned of the light, you know, I mean, I know I appreciate the berm going in because the headlights are the worst thing, right? Because that's just happening frequently. But, you know, porch lights on and, you know, garage overhead lights on and lights on in the house and everything else are, I mean, it's nice if you don't have to see those. So I think, you know, trees and landscaping in that area to me makes sense for the purpose of improving the buffer. Right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
Provides more privacy for the homeowners in downtown and more, you know, less light intrusion for the folks up in Waterford.
So again, not a condition of approval for this PD, but as a recommendation.
And is there a way that we can strongly recommend that?
Sure.
Strong support of improving the buffer. Any other easy ones that you want us to talk about?
I don't know that it's an easy one. I did get pretty clear clarification on Lisa's opinion on the Coal Creek connection, but I don't know.
Yeah, I wanted to just kind of get people's thoughts on the Coal Creek connection. See if we want to, because right now it's as it stands right now, the Coal Creek connection is in place to connect to Lantern. The developer will take care of that. It's paid for, is that right? Is that part of their responsibility to connect Coal Creek Drive? If 88th Street is a considered connection, that's a town responsibility, right? That's not a.
Offsite it would be, yeah.
Yeah, so why don't we just work our way down, Mr. Harper?
I think Coal Creek is better.
You think what?
I think Coal Creek is better than 88th Street.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay. Jerry?
I'm in support of the Coal Creek connection to Promenade. I agree with our Public Works Director that we need to maintain the speed through there very carefully. And when you look at the drawings that are on this resolution, the Coal Creek is a very wide street where it is now. And as it enters Lanterns and continues through, it narrows. And so it's not going to stay that width all the way through, which would maintain people's speeds and things like that. I don't have a concern with it, frankly. I think it's well designed. I think it's been expected since the annexation agreement, frankly. I was just looking at the annexation agreement, and there's a connection of Coal Creek into the future downtown. So I'm good with it.
Commissioner Ritchie?
Yeah, nothing further on that one for me.
Okay, you're in favor of connecting, as I know you said. I've always been in favor of connecting Coal Creek, and I agree with Commissioner Malia that the idea of making sure that stays calm. I think I brought it up in the last meeting that bringing the existing 4 lanes down to 2 lanes is, I'm in favor of, or bringing that down to make sure that stays a quiet street. I don't want to put that in as a condition, but I think it's important that we look very closely at Coal Creek Drive as it sits now to make sure that stays a less desirable cut-through street is sort of my thinking, and more of a, I mean, the idea here is to connect our neighborhoods, not to provide cut-through traffic for outside the environment. And I think as you go through town, it's not desirable to cut through there. You know, you hit Village Green, you've got to go around that. You've got stop signs. I just don't feel like it's it's going to be a cut through or a fast cut through. Not that people won't use it, but it's not going to be like in Indiana even, you know, where you can move through it. So.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. And I am in support of it and have been since the beginning. My understanding that this was designed to be a through street since the initial development plans for Rock Creek. And it just, you know, we've enjoyed not having, you know, traffic go through there for some people. But I think that it's a good idea. And I want to reiterate what you were saying. I don't think it's going to be a cut-through street. I think that people who will use that street will know Creek, and they'll know how, you know, to get through downtown center back to their particular neighborhood. And so I support that as well. And, you know, always have.
Same here for all the reasons mentioned. First thing I did when I saw this plan was pull up the master or the transportation plan 2014. Sure shows the connection. If I was buying a house, that's one of the first things I look at and factor my offer in for the house, you know, appropriately. So,
Phyllis?
Anthony stole my words. I guess I'm the only one here that was here in 1990 when Rock Creek was developed. And that was always planned to go through. It was actually planned to connect to Coal Creek Drive
Yeah,
in original
to our Coal Creek,
town.
yes, that was.
And so I'm in favor of doing that.
Yeah, that was the, yeah, and I didn't get here till 97, but I did hear that somewhere along the line, so, and we've heard mixed, and I do understand you were going to have mixed. We had people last week who were, yes, please put that through. It's important, and others that didn't, so I know it's a struggle to create connections. But in general, I think the more connections we make, the better it is for everybody. And 88, I'm also, I'd love for us, again, not part of this PD, but I'd like to, and if I can, I'll see if I can get support here, but because we could add this into our, just what we're in favor of, or a recommendation to look forward to 88th Street and getting that developed when it makes sense for the town, because that's just another connection that would, you know, reduce people who might cut through on Coal Creek to be able to just come down 88th and go straight into town without disturbing anybody. So, I don't know, any feedback on that? I'm asking that because it's a little...
It would be nice just to improve 88th Street, actually.
Well, we can't, I mean, there's a big dollar amount. I mean, it's not part of this PD, so we can't really approve it, but we can, you know, express our support and our desires. So.
Well, and I agree with you, Chairman McCool, because one of the things 88th provides is the connection to Louisville or to the hospital and the schools that are there. But there's also an enormous amount of vacant land over there that Louisville is looking at developing. And that 88th bridge is going to become highly popular, and it's going to connect more so businesses to residential, you know.
Well, and that property's in process right now. They've actually met with the town, they've met with chambers, they've been, we don't have official word, I don't think yet, of who the big company is coming in, other than that there's a 2,500 employee organization coming in, and senior housing is the other one. So you want to, I forget the name of the development now that's coming in there. You may know, if you've been paying attention.
And I don't think we have enough time tonight to get into senior housing.
But anyway, that's being looked at in that development tonight too. So.
Yeah, I would reiterate. I think my suggestion on that is just hopefully staff can make sure that we're not precluding, you know, through this design, any future connection that we may decide to fund on our own to connect out to 88th.
Yep.
So just as long as we're not kind of preventing that in any design, hopefully with drainage or detention ponds or anything like that. Hopefully it remains an option in the future.
It's a little pricey, but it's doable as I understand it, right? Is there anybody not in favor? Are we all good with just putting our support in to to get 88th connected when the town can't? Is that fine? Okay. So I guess at the same level of your tract H landscaping and your tract H park, and 88th Street is something we're interested in.
Okay.
I think we're all okay with the VSA. Is that true? I want to make sure that's just, that we put that out there, that we feel like we've seen, we've heard from the legal side, we've seen our own imagery, we've all read the annexation agreement, understand the struggle, but it's been interpreted, and our responsibility is to make sure that the development is following the PD, and we've heard from legal that it is. So, okay. Is there anything else that anybody wants to put in here? So we've got the three-way stop sign, the adjustment to the look and feel of the, or no similar homes in Paseos, alleys, and streets.
Continue to work on the bicycle connection.
Yeah, let me get that bicycle one. I'd be open to discussing that briefly, because we may be able to just, you know, without designing it, could we say something to the effect of separate, maybe Ben, you're probably best at this, but separation of pedestrians.
Find a solution that doesn't involve requesting people to dismount their bikes, because it'll be ignored.
Well, I wanted to go a little farther and say, yes, I agree with that 100%. So in fact, I would say remove the dismount. I'm good with that as a statement in of itself, remove the dismount of the area. But in addition, I'd like to say that we're requesting that there be a separation of pedestrian and bicycle traffic. Or, well, yeah, just a safe passage for pedestrians and bikes. And I like what, I was thinking exactly what Stephen brought up was, I think there's enough room there that you could put a one foot landscape strip or dirt strip or color, something to just say bikes are over here, pedestrians are over here, right? And even maybe even say no bikes on the side. Because you're right, I don't want to walk out my door and go, whoa, crap. Right, so.
And the city I used to live in had a similar situation as a rail trail, apartments right up to the trail, and I think it was 14-foot wide concrete path. That felt right. And I know this is narrower than that. Maybe, it'll be lower volume here than in downtown Charlotte, but somewhere between 10 and 14 feet is probably workable, assuming the doors are right off of the trail.
There's a setback, so it's not like you're stepping back.
So then, I mean, there's some common sense that, we think of the worst case scenario, but if you're riding through there and there's doors right up to the path, you're hopefully not riding through at 20 miles an hour and not paying attention.
Okay.
So for clarification, does there need to be a separation of a pedestrian walkway and a bike path?
That's what I was suggesting. And I was putting a safe separation between bikes and pedestrians, but.
We could put, something a little bit more loose, like a separation or otherwise distinguish the two.
Or adequate width for a shared use path, because I've always heard, I thought to actually
I'm fine
physically
with adequate
separate
support for bikes and pedestrians on that pathway. That's fine, and that's general, and it's in there, and I'd like that to be as a condition in here. So I don't mind keeping it vague, but I'd like it in as a condition. So.
Did you get something typed up on that?
I have. Applicants shall update their plans to provide an updated plan for the bicycle lane to have a division or adequate width between the automobile and bicycle traffic.
Pedestrian and bicycle traffic, sorry.
Pedestrian,
a real problem on that.
And it's
right, that would
so you really
make it wide enough.
Right.
And to be specific, it's through block 21.
Okay, so you're getting these down, Dan, in this?
Yep.
Okay, cool, thank you. All right, and we got the removing of the bike dismount signs. Maybe make that part of this, that same entry would be great. And you've got the three-way stop at?
I have that into condition E.
Okay, and then the adjustment, the Paseo thing with the alleys, and you've got that, okay, all right. Do we need to read all these conditions, or can we just?
I think you can just indicate as drafted, including the three additional conditions as discussed by the commission.
Okay, and then I'll be able to review it. I'll sign that, right, fellas, before I'll get to review it and sign off on it. And Okay, I think we're ready to entertain a motion. Anybody want to give it a shot?
Move to approve resolution number 4, series 2019, recommending approval of a final plat, final development plan for blocks 16 through 24 Superior Town Center. Case numbers FP 2019-4 and FDP 2019-2 with the conditions as drafted in the resolution, as well as the additional conditions as drafted and amended here tonight by the town attorney.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Ritchie. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Second by Commissioner Miller. All in favor? We've got all but Commissioner Harper. That's a yay. And opposed? And Commissioner Harper opposed. Okay, and that passes. Thank you. Yeah, public hearing closed. All right. Staff announcements?
No announcements.
No announcements.
Do we have a calendar for upcoming meetings? Do you have any
Yeah, do we have a
anything
meeting
that's
this
calendared?
Tuesday? Yeah, we have a Tuesday.
We're targeting October, mid-October, like probably your second PC meeting for your next development review, but not set yet, so. Any other questions or? No, okay. This has been my world lately, so I don't have anything to update on. You guys know everything.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sure, no, thank you,
all the
appreciate
hard
it.
work and good documentation. That was really helpful.
Yeah, I want to echo that. Great job,
Yeah, this was a lot,
Stephen. It was very helpful. And,
Yeah,
give us
if you
some
guys
good
ever have any
direction.
suggestions on how it can be more succinct or more clear, then I'm always open to feedback, so.
Okay. And we have some work plan stuff to do, but I mean, we have an upcoming meeting on Tuesday, but we have nothing,
We have nothing scheduled.
nothing scheduled. So
if you want to hold
say
it,
let's let one more go by this
Okay.
summer. And then what I'd like to do is we have open meetings. Let's get working on our work plan items. Okay.
All right. And I appreciate your guys' time too. A special meeting tonight and the long meeting last week to get through this. So.
Cool. All right. All good. All right. We're adjourned.